Hi, I'm Mimi Geerges, a hair-raising story of child abuse and neglect, and real solutions to fix our broken foster care system.
My stepbrother and I were punished if we had eaten food that we weren't allowed to eat, or if we ate more food than we were supposed to eat.
Because you were hungry anyway.
It was merely about a paycheck and me taking up as little money and time as I could.
Welcome to the Mimi Geerges Show. Shenandoah Chefalo's story is unfortunately too common in a dysfunctional family. As a child, her addicted mother and stepfather abused and neglected her, even starving her as punishment. She endured loneliness and multiple moves in the middle of the night with just enough time to grab the few possessions she had. In foster care, things didn't get that much better. But unlike most stories like this, she didn't end up in jail or homeless. She got a college degree and is now advocating for fixing our foster care system. Shenandoah Chefalo's memoir is called Bag Suitcase. Shen, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
The title Bag Suitcase refers to the many times that you were awoken in the middle of the night saying, let's go, we're getting out of here, and you just had enough time to get some stuff together in a garbage bag.
Absolutely. It's about the transient nature of growing up in dysfunction and how that carries through, and how maybe we still then carry those feelings and emotions around in a garbage bag with us too. So it's kind of a dual meaning. It's the physical meaning of moving with a garbage bag, and it's the secondary meaning of those things that last forever.
And one thing that always made it into that garbage bag was that bunny that you brought with you.
Yeah, absolutely. We couldn't do it without Love Bunny, right?
And you talk about Love Bunny in the book, actually.
Yeah.
He was pretty much the only thing that you had that was stable and that you felt loved by, if we can say that.
Yeah, he became kind of a conscience, I guess, where I really believed as a child that I could have conversations and that he could kind of tell me what to do in situations where I didn't necessarily know what to do. So he kind of became a guiding force and really the only friend I had for a big portion of my life. And by some mystery, he made it all these years.
You know, I don't want to make you relive the painful experiences that you had, because I know that you went through a lot, but I think for us to really get an idea of what you went through, if you could just tell us some of the things that happened to you as a child.
Well, so it was a lot of psychological things, and I think that's something that's important to remember, that not everything, bruises leave marks that other people can see. So, you know, with my mom and my stepfather, you know, one of the things was I didn't know my stepfather was my stepfather for numerous years and believed that he was my father. So that in of itself turns into a trauma when I find that news. But things like being starved. So my stepbrother and I were punished oftentimes if we had eaten food that we weren't allowed to eat, or if we ate more food than we were supposed to eat.
Because you were hungry anyway.
Because
there wasn't enough
hungry.
Food in the house.
Right. And so if we just helped ourselves to something in the fridge, we were often punished, and that punishment would usually range with missing food for a certain number of days, and it escalated as we got older. So originally, where it may be missing a meal, it went to 2 days or 3 days or a week of not eating.
And you were just trapped in your room and...
Yeah, we were stuck in our rooms, not allowed to leave, you know, to the point of questioning each other, like, would it be okay to use the restroom? Like, can we leave to use the restroom? And making those types of decisions and choices, and how sick that makes you and how scared you are to say anything. And so you just live in that, and it seems very normal. You don't, when you live that way, you don't realize it's not normal and other people aren't living that way.
One time you were pushed out of a moving car.
Yeah. People ask me about all the characters in my book, who's the person I'd want to see most right now? And I'd want to see the woman whose yard I rolled into. I have so many questions for her. So I was pushed out of a moving vehicle by my stepfather.
You were about 6 years old at the time?
I was about 6 at the time that it happened. We were driving through a wealthy neighborhood, and I ended up rolling onto the lawn of a woman who was out doing some gardening in her yard. And I really want to ask her what she thought as that happens. And I, of course, think about myself and what I would do if that happened to me and how I would respond. And why she didn't call anybody, right? Because that's the next question, is my stepfather then circles back some 20 minutes later to come get me.
He's the one that opened the door, though.
He's the one
This
who
wasn't an
opened the door.
accident.
This was not an accident. It was a real thing. and then comes back and is dragging me away. And I can't help but wonder why she didn't pick up the phone. And I think that's a question we all would have. And would we? Would we get involved? Because oftentimes we don't get involved. We have a gut instinct about something or a feeling, but we don't say anything or do anything.
Were you ever told that you were loved or that you were a valuable child?
No. And one of the turning points for me is in 6th grade when a teacher just looks me dead in the eye and says, "You did a really good job on this. You're really great." And it was the first time I had heard that. And it is right before I make a decision to go into foster care. And it happens at a powerful moment. And I explain it to people that our words have so much power, and sometimes the words that we don't think. This is a 6th grade teacher who probably told 1,000 students that same comment and made that comment millions of times in his career. And I don't think he ever thought twice about making the comment to me. I think he just said it and kind of moved on with his day and probably never again thought about that comment. But it really exploded my life because he was the first person to say that.
Let's talk about school, because you were moving so much that you hardly did one full school year in any given school.
That's correct. 35 schools between kindergarten and high school, and 33 of those schools are prior to foster care. So are between kindergarten and 8th grade, really.
So how did you end up with any kind of a reasonable education?
Yeah, well, that many moves and that many districts, I mean, you're lucky if you can get in the same school district a continuing education piece. I think I was really lucky, and I was a really good reader. And I think those are just things I kind of lucked into naturally as my own ability, but it was difficult.
Do you think that there's a role for public schools to notice kids like you that are, because you totally fell through the cracks. I mean, you would come and go, and nobody really said, look, there's a problem here. There's a problem in this child's family.
And I think that is the problem with public schools in general, is that they operate locally. And so what my parents were really good at was knowing that maybe some red flags were being sent up the pole, and so we moved. And then you avoid that whole thing, and there's no continuity between cities, let alone between states. And we were often crossing state lines.
Did you ever find out why your mom picked you up and moved so many times?
Well, drug addiction was a big part of that. Another big part of that was that my stepfather was running from the law, or so we thought. And so he spent a big part of that moving us, that if he was on the radar, then the police might find him and come and get him. Turns out much later in my life, in my late 30s, when I hire a private detective, he's actually running from a ghost. But that was part of the reason for a lot of the moves.
What led you into the foster care system? How did you make that transition?
I had actually been sent to stay with an aunt for a summer in California. We had moved back to Michigan. We were in Michigan at the time, but I had been sent to live with an aunt in California for the summertime. And when I flew back home, there was nobody at the airport.
And you were 13.
And I was 13. And I took the city bus to my grandmother's house, who lived in a retirement community at the time. Just thought I'd stay there and that my mom would show up. It was kind of common for my mom to disappear for days or weeks at a time, so I wasn't initially concerned. And I'd been with my grandmother for about a week, and people in the community were starting to talk. And you could have an overnight guest, but you really couldn't live there, and what was I doing? And so my mom still hadn't reappeared, and so it became a decision that I was either going to be homeless or I had to report myself to care. And so I reported myself to foster care.
And were you hoping that everything would turn out okay at this point?
I thought that was my chance at my happy ending. And that's kind of the theme in the book, is like kind of always looking for my Disney ending, and where you get swept away and everything's going to be okay. And so I thought it was going to be the answer, that parents who maybe couldn't have kids or wanted this child, is someone who really wanted to be a parent and had gone through all this training and background search, and they were going to be the best that our country had to offer, so to speak, in the way of parents, would surely be the answer.
I wanted to read you one little part of your book, because you said this: "I assume that families or couples who were taking in foster kids would be top-notch. Surely someone who had gone through vigorous training, underwent background checks, and had a caseworker checking in on them regularly would be the greatest parents of all." What did you find when you went into foster care?
The exact opposite. I originally go into a kinship care situation living with my mom's sister, who was a foster parent and had been a foster parent by chance, my mom's oldest sister. And that's a short-lived experiment that goes terribly wrong for lots of reasons. She's still in contact with my mom, and there's all sorts of other stuff going on in that situation. And then handpicks who my next foster parents will be, because she, of course, knows all the foster parents in the area. And again, I'm left with nothing. It is
nothing in what sense?
It's a feeling of loneliness and abandonment, that there is just no connection to anyone. Quickly, I became aware of the paycheck that I was tied to.
In other words, you were the paycheck.
Yep.
You were a way to pay the bills.
Yes.
Not somebody to dote on and somebody to care about. And
it was about income, and it was about nothing more than that. It wasn't about solving any issues or traumas I had. I had not seen a medical doctor or a psychologist or a counselor in any time that I had been in care. It was merely about a paycheck and me taking up as little money and time as I could.
When was the last time that you saw your mom?
When I was 13, I had been placed temporarily with my aunt. She appeared for a moment to tell me about a new move she was doing with a new boyfriend, this time to Nebraska, and asked me if I would come with her. I told her no, and that was the last time I saw her.
Because she didn't want to see you?
No idea. She's still alive, but I've not seen her since. I got a card from her after an accident when I was 17. I was in a car accident. I got a not very friendly card from her, but that's the only communication I've had with her since I was 13.
You were in the hospital for 3 weeks. It was a serious accident.
It was a serious accident.
And nobody came to see you. Nobody came to care about you.
Nope. My foster parents showed up at the emergency room when they were first called, but once I was kind of moved around and it looked like things were going to be okay, just needed the healing time of the hospital, I didn't see anybody for the remainder of the time that I was in the hospital.
And the letter that you got from your mother, dismissive?
Dismissive. Actually said it would have been easier if I would have died.
Easier for who?
Your guess and my guess are the same.
So, I wonder how you were doing socially during this time in foster care, because you would have been a teenager.
Right. I was really reclusive and standoffish, and I did a lot of things that I thought would just make me fit in. And so my whole life, when we moved that much, I had become really good at trying to blend in. And I say it's kind of running in the middle. If you were an A student, people noticed you and wanted to fawn all over you. And if you were failing, people wanted to talk to your parents. So I had learned that if you could manage the middle and you could be an A-B student, occasionally get a C, and if you occasionally missed class and you weren't perfect and you did these things, then nobody kind of noticed you and you could blend in. So I became quite good at blending in. And when I entered foster care, that was my plan, to blend in and to say as little and do as little and draw as little attention as possible.
Usually, and I don't have to tell you this, when kids grow up abused and neglected with drug and alcohol addicted parents, they turn to drugs and alcohol and destructive behavior to ease their pain. I mean, I'm glad that didn't happen to you, but I'm wondering why.
Yeah, I think because I had this mindset that if I was going to do anything, I had to do the opposite of my mom. And I don't know how or why, maybe the rabbit popped that into my mind.
He told you.
Maybe he told me. So everything that I thought about doing, I would ask what my mother would do. So like when it came to graduating from high school, my mother hadn't graduated. So I thought, okay, then I won't turn out like her if I graduate from high school. And I knew my mom's issues with drugs and alcohol. They were apparent. She, as the story tells, she did numerous drugs in front of me and was drunk most of my life. And so I was very well aware, and I felt from a young age that she made a lot of poor decisions because of that. I didn't really understand the whole addiction issue as a kid, but I knew she made poor decisions when using those things. And so I just never did them. I think I was really scared that if I did it once, I somehow would become her. So I didn't experiment a lot for me trying to get to the age of 18, because I think I felt like a lot of people thought I'd be pregnant early, I would be on drugs. And so I was like, if I could just get to 18, and I had kind of set that as the bar for myself. get to 18, don't be pregnant, don't be on drugs, and you should be okay. And that'll be the answer.
And you did get to 18.
I did.
And then that boots you right out of the foster care system.
Yeah, I turned 18 halfway through my senior year of high school. So I hadn't graduated yet and was facing homelessness again. And then negotiated with my foster parents to stay. I agreed to pay them rent and the amount that they had been receiving from the state so I could stay, so I could graduate from high school.
And you had decided to look for your biological father, even though your mom told you many times, he doesn't want you, he doesn't love you, he's awful.
He was my plan B because I could pay this money through the end of my senior year, but then what would I do? I would have no place to live. So he was kind of my only fallback I had. I couldn't think of anybody else where could I go to live? And it was about basic necessity. I had become curious about who this man was because I only had found out at the age of 12 that I had a father, that my father wasn't my father. And so I had become kind of curious to know, was rationalizing, I think, in my own mind that, okay, my mom had lied about a lot of things. Maybe she lied about this too. And I needed a place to live. It was a real basic need. So all of those things kind of boil together.
But you still weren't able to make that emotional connection with him, even though you found him. And
I found him.
Again, we're looking for that fairy tale ending. It didn't happen.
It didn't happen. He wasn't ready for it to happen, I don't think. You know, he was in a new life. I was now 18 years old when I found him, and he had moved on in his life. And so we weren't at the same place in trying to rectify the past.
Only 3% of foster kids go to college, and only 1% actually graduate with a 4-year degree. How were you able to buck those trends, not only go to college, but graduate?
Yeah, one of the things I advocate is that everybody needs one caring adult, and it just takes one. Mine came in the form of another great teacher who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and she asked me to apply to college because my plan was to continue cashiering at the hardware store I was working at to pay my rent currently. That was my big plan. And she said, I think you should think about college. And so she sent me down to the guidance counselor who gave me really terrible advice and said, in so many words, people like you don't go to college, people like you learn to serve people like me. Meaning, wow, I should just get a job and, as a waitress, as a maid, that's what people like me do. And I didn't think anything of it when he said it because I'd been told that a lot.
You believed it?
Yeah, people were waiting for me to turn into my mother, and that was a common thing. Like, just wait, okay, at 13 she's okay, but at 14, and then when I turned 14 and nothing had happened, at 15, at 16, everyone was kind of waiting for that. So I was used to hearing that. But when I went back to her classroom, she said, what did he say? And I told her, and her head almost spun off. She was visibly angered by this comment. And I thought I had done something. Turns out that, she's upset that this person would give that advice.
Yeah.
So she wrote me a $125 check, which happened to be the application fee, which I couldn't pay for. And I ended up at her alma mater, Michigan State.
How did it go for you once you got there?
Again, I was looking for the fairy tale if I just get to college. So I made it to orientation week and quickly realized I was in for it.
You were all alone?
I was completely alone with nothing and without any income because I quit my job that I'd been working to get to the college campus, and I had nothing. And by the time the first break comes around for Thanksgiving, I have nowhere to go and end up at the international dorm. And at Christmas, when the entire campus shuts down for Christmas break and even the international students are going home, I had to befriend the maintenance man in my dorm who gave me a key so I could stay in my dorm, or I would have been homeless. And I probably would have never come back to campus by Christmas.
How did you pay for college?
Student loans, which worked out well, but I ended up having to get a job because I had all these other expenses. It worked out for tuition and books, but food on Sunday when the cafeteria was closed, there was nothing. And just things like toothpaste and deodorant and all of those things that I had literally no money for. And
At one point, you got really depressed while you were in college.
absolutely. It was the loneliest I ever felt. So even with all the abuse of my biological family and feeling the loneliness, being on a college campus with that many students and feeling like you're the only person suffering, I stopped going to class, became really depressed, and then became suicidal because of it.
How did you pull yourself out of that?
Miraculous things happen. One caring adult. I was working for a professor who said, maybe you should go see somebody. And because I'm on a college campus, there's great people, right? Great professionals. And I walked into a counselor's office for the first time ever and said, I think something's wrong with me. My aunt had tried to diagnose me as bipolar for most of my life and manic depressive, and said, I think this is what's happening to me. I had kind of succumbed to her armchair doctoring and said, I think this is why I feel this way. And after 20 minutes, he said, I hate to tell you that you're just 18 and nothing's wrong with you. And that was kind of the momentum and the push that I got to say, I got to let all of this go and nothing's wrong with me and I can do this.
You graduated, you married, you had a daughter. How did you feel about becoming a mother?
Terrified.
Because you thought, again, you were going to become like your mother?
I thought I would be my mother. And so I told myself when I had my daughter, if I can make it to when she's 12, I think I'll be okay. Because my mom made it to 12. So if my mom can make it to 12, I can make it to 12. So if I can make it to when she's 12, I should be okay. She's getting ready to turn 14, so we're doing okay. But I was terrified. I thought I was going to be the worst mother ever. She probably thinks I'm the worst mother ever. But yeah, I was terrified.
So let's talk about solutions. We talked about how you thought that foster parents would be the best in the world, and they're not. So is the solution to attract higher quality foster parents?
I think it's one of the solutions. I think that's tough to do, though, because you're asking someone to make such a huge sacrifice, and we already have such a shortage of parents. I think we could do a better job in training foster parents who kind of go in not knowing what they're getting into. I think we could also do a better job at matching kids with parents. Currently, we're just looking for beds a lot of times. And I joke that we have Match.com and they do all this great matching for people on dating sites, but with kids, we're kind of like, here you go, and we just throw them into a bed in a household, which I don't think is good for kids or the parents, the potential foster parents, because not everybody's gonna mesh and get along. So I think that's one solution that we could do. I think because of our shortage of foster parents, perhaps looking at boarding schools is a better option. And
Isn't that much more expensive, though?
Well, yes and no. It's how much do you want to put in on the front end, I guess. When we look at how much foster care costs us, there's a cost just with foster care and having a kid with a home and what those people are being paid. But the cost is much greater when we talk about incarceration rates and homeless rates and welfare rates and teen pregnancy rates and how much higher they are for people in foster care versus their peers who are not. If you add all of that in, it's way less expensive to give them a proper education. And I came to boarding schools when I came at this problem with what would have been the perfect solution for me. What would I have wanted as that 13-year-old girl? And what I wanted was to be surrounded by people that were like me. I did not know a single other foster person in foster care, so that was isolating itself. And I just wanted to think about my education and my future and prove to people that I wouldn't be like my mother.
So what are some of the other policy changes that we can make?
Yeah, there's this idea of fostering the whole family, which may have not worked in my situation, but when you have a parent who maybe is struggling with addiction and is coming oftentimes from their own trauma, right? That untreated trauma that they had. Perhaps they'd been in foster care themselves and they have unresolved issues. And then they develop an addiction themselves, and we're coming in to remove a child to essentially try to help them get fixed and also protect the child. But how do we heal their trauma? How does that happen? And so if we foster the whole family where not only the child, but the mother, because oftentimes these are single mother situations, are moving into a home with a family to be fostered together and to heal all of their trauma.
How do you foster an adult? I mean, how would that work?
Well, because oftentimes they don't have the skills that a traditional adult would have. Oftentimes they've never had a bank account. Oftentimes they've never held a job. And all those things where they've lost those skills or never had those skills, they still need, and they need an adult to help them, almost to help them learn to parent as well. And so it's almost a mentoring situation as well as fostering.
You talked about, in the beginning of that garbage bag of stuff that adults will carry around from, being abused as a child. What are some of the scars that you're still dealing with, that you still have?
Heavy scars and funny scars. So when I talk to a lot of people who've been in the foster care system, kind of one of the funny things that people think is maybe just a quirk is, like, we love to give gifts, and we're really big on making sure we pick out the perfect gift for somebody. But we are the absolute worst gift receivers.
Why?
I think it's hard for us to be the center of attention. That's never been our role in life, really, and that can be overwhelming feeling. Some of us feel like it's attached to something. Gifts are often attached to things, and so we're
like
cautious.
You're going to be expecting to get to give something in return.
Yeah, and so we're cautious of that. So there's funny little quirky things, I think, that we carry with us, and then there's more serious things. We have issues with food that we contend with often. Money, self-worth, those are things that on a daily basis I still have to grapple with and think about and understand why I make the decisions I make.
Why did you write this book?
For one reason, to change kids' lives and to change our communities. It's too many times I'm just seeing these terrible statistics. These kids grow up and become adults in our world, and then we're unhappy with how they're acting and how they're behaving, and we have to change it. And I think people need to understand what it's like to grow up in that situation so we can make changes, so that there's buy-in from the whole community on why this issue is important and why we need to change it.
Have you ever thought about becoming a foster parent yourself?
I have. My husband and I were licensed for a very short period of time, and then we gave back our license after our first placement because of the system, because of how the system was being run, because of the things that were being said that both of us with our backgrounds in the law knew were inaccurate or untrue.
Like what?
Getting a placement in the middle of the night and being asked within 24 hours to make a decision about adoption. So to know within 24 hours that you were willing to adopt two people who came to you in the middle of the night. If you're not comfortable making that decision, then the kids are going to be moved.
Wow.
That's a tough deal.
I mean, is that just in that particular case, or is that widespread across the entire foster care system?
It's pretty widespread that you're asked pretty quickly to make a determination. And individual states go back and forth a lot of times between every kid's going to be reunified and every kid's going to be adopted. And so when they're in a reunification mode, then everything's about getting those kids back to a bio parent. And when they're in an adoption mode, it's about, okay, can you commit to adopting this kid? And if you can't, we have to find somebody who is.
Wow. So, I mean, I'm going to give you the last word. What do you want to leave us with for, just the general public that has not gone through this, has not gone through abuse, has not been involved in any way in the foster care system?
We all have the power to do something, that sometimes it's just a kind word or a kind gesture that can really change somebody's life. And that's all it takes. We just need to be kinder to each other.
Shen, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story and for being on the program.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you to Love Bunny as well. This has been the Mimi Geerges Show. You can connect with us on social media and leave your comments there. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me again next time.